Johnson, and the other one.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting through my website, emailrevealer.com, or you can just email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. If you like our show, be sure and check out our Patreon at the Opperman Report. And as a matter of fact, our guest today, T.H. Johnson, you can find a show we did with him in there. It's about Geronimo Pratt. And also, too, if you go to Spreaker.com, you can find many, many shows with T.H. Johnson. We've done several hours with him. About the OJ Simpson case. Now, T.H. Johnson is the investigative team coordinator for OMIG, Ocean Medical Investigative Group. He's done a documentary film called Serpents Rising, the OJ Simpson Conspiracy. And I'm telling you, if you watch that film, it's going to open up your mind and open up your eyes about everything you ever thought you knew about the OJ Simpson case. As a matter of fact, whenever I see comments about that, it's always someone who hasn't watched the documentary or read the book yet, okay? 2 books he's written, Pursuit of Exhibit 35, in the OJ Simpson Murder Trial and Its Hidden Secrets, T.H. Johnson. And the other one is The New Witnesses Reveal the Hidden Truth, The People versus O.J. Simpson, The Real Crime. Mr. T.H. Johnson, are you there?
I'm here, Ed.
Thank you so much. Can you tell the audience about yourself? Who is T.H. Johnson?
Well, I'm a African American gentleman. 70. I'll be 72 years old in the next 6 months here, and I have been the investigative coordinator for the Ocean Medical Investigative Group since November of 1996. Let me move that up because we hadn't created OMIG in November of 1996. That's when I first saw the autopsy reports of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman that had been delivered to my brother, Dr. Henry Johnson, who is the chairman of the Ocean Medical Investigative Group. But within, I would say, 4 months after that, or certainly within 6 months of that, I think by March or April of 1997 is when we decided that we probably needed to create the Ocean Medical Investigative Group. And we've been functioning as that ever since that period of time and going into the trenches to examine evidence that often is contradictory to the stipulations and other non-evidence that has become the basis of entry in the Simpson trial of 1995. Was born in Texas, raised in Minnesota. Our father was a medical doctor there, and there never was any pressure placed on us, but I think that there was some expectation that one or multiple of us were going to become doctors. Mm-hmm. And I did not. My youngest brother, who passed away about a month ago, he started out in medical school first because he didn't think that either I or my brother, who is a doctor out in Los Angeles, was going to do it. And but the fascinating thing as I think about it is I was thinking about my younger brother quite often here over the last couple of weeks, and his passing over in Atlanta, Georgia. And I remember how our father, who became pretty much of a notable physician in Minnesota, who tended to over 10,000 patients there, but at the time that he was interning at the University of Minnesota, he would, as an intern at a particular hospital, they were always trying to throw him out because they said that they thought that he was going to be automatically accepted to the School of Pathology at the University of Minnesota. And so they said, well, since you weren't accepted there, and we don't think that you're going to get comfortable functioning here at our hospital, and as soon as we can find a way to drum you out, that's what we're going to do. And so my father had this method of analyzation to where he would analyze everything that was not wrong with you before expressing what was correct, what was right, And, when he would go around with whoever it was, the senior doctor that was escorting the interns around, and they would ask him a question, he would go through this litany of things. And so when he became a doctor, he became one of the most powerful medical doctors for the plaintiff's attorneys in these personal injury cases in Minnesota. And all of the insurance companies they loved my dad because he was really good. But one of the attorneys called us one day and he said, I wish you'd talk to your dad and tell him, don't go through that litany of things, of when he's examining the patient and saying all of these things that this and that wasn't wrong with the person and that type of thing and what was right with the person. Well, my dad told me one day when I told him what the lawyer said, he said, that's the only way that I made it through medical school. And so that's the way that we were taught, whether we went on to be doctors or not. And so my brother, I'm certain, used a similar approach when he was looking at those autopsy reports of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. And one week I was visiting out in Los Angeles, he said, these people were not killed in the manner that they testified to in Simpson's trial. And that's where the Ocean Medical Investigative Group actually began. And I told him, I said, well, man, back in Minnesota, I know a fellow who retired as a quartermaster sergeant. And he keeps meticulous records of everything, and he's taped his trial, starting with the preliminary hearing. He said, well, go back and see if you can get a copy of the medical testimony. So when I got back to Minnesota that winter, I think it was back, I'd always go out to California around Super Bowl time, so when I got back there, I think the first week of February, I went by, talked with the guy. He said, yeah, I can pull the medical stuff. And when we pulled the medical testimony, then we could see that the longest prosecution witness that testified in the Simpson criminal trial was the substitute medical examiner that did not participate in the autopsies. In fact, he didn't even go to the murder site until 6 months after the murders had taken place. And that was Dr. Lakshmanan. And the actual doctor who performed the autopsies, whose name was written on these autopsy reports, Dr. Irwin Golden, that was the individual that they kept from being able to testify in Simpson's trial. But when you go back, this gentleman that I'm telling you about, the quartermaster, had pulled tapes over 14 months. And when you rolled the tape back, I think it was almost a year to the preliminary hearings, here's this guy that was the actual doctor who had performed the autopsies testifying during the preliminary hearing. And when you listen to his testimony and they ask him, he said based upon his morphological examination of the victims' bodies, he had discovered that there were two different type of knife wounds as exit wounds from the victims' bodies. One of them represented a single-edged knife, sharp on one side, blunt on the other, and the other knife had the indication of a double-edged knife or a dagger. And so they did not want this individual on the witness stand during the Simpson trial. So they brought in this other doctor who stayed on the witness stand for 9 days, more than any other prosecution witness that testified during the 6 months that they promoted their case against Simpson. So that's kind of the backdrop of how we came to be. This is our 24th year as of November 2020. So that's how long I've been associated with this organization.
Yeah, I really encourage everybody to check out the film Serpents Rising, where they do recreations and stuff like this. You'll see that many people argue with me that I watched the whole trial, that they never testified that, but you can see the tape in Serpents Rising. Now, Mr. Johnson, we were chatting on Facebook the other night as well. And if anybody can get on Mr. Johnson's Facebook friends, he's a very interesting guy. He always has interesting topics to talk about, all varied stuff, really always cool stuff. I enjoy your Facebook page quite a bit. But we were chatting the other night, and you were telling me something about how you came into contact with Dr. Fred Whitehurst, who I also had as a guest on the show. Can you tell us that and the significance?
Well, I was reviewing the interview that you had done with me. I don't hardly listen to myself after the first time, but for some reason, 6 months later, I said, let me go back and revisit that interview. It's something that I want to see that Ed asked me about. And so when I came to your site, I said, oh, Ed had done an interview with this guy, Frederick Whitehurst, probably a year before you had done it with me. And I said, wow. I said, I remember this fellow. You know, we were on pins and needles to see what he would have to say regarding the Simpson trial. So I listened to his tape on the taped interview you did with him, and I was blown away. I said, I gotta contact this guy. And just like him, I reached out to him through Facebook and found that he had a Facebook page. He didn't have too much on it. He was kind of like Steven Singular, who I reached out to maybe 3 or 4 years prior. And both of them were like, I rarely am on Facebook. You know, here's my email address and here's a phone number, you know, contact me here. And I don't like doing as much telephone conversations as I like email conversations, because I can keep a record of our interactions. And so that's how Fred Whitehurst and I met one another at that time. But up until the time that you interviewed me in 2016, based upon the trenches that we've been in, uncovering this evidence and so forth, I'm not too excited about things that I hear people say regarding the Simpson case that assume that they know this and they know that about it, because most of these people, individuals like Dan Abrams on ABC News and just anybody, I don't care who it is, they're basically talking from a tabloid standpoint. And in my opinion, tabloid journalism is a poor standard for an investigative journalist, and that's what Abrams was, whether he wants to accept it or not, when he was sitting in the back of that civil trial courtroom when they did the civil trial on Simpson. And the only reason that I bring up his name is because he said something that I was offended by when my brother was invited to speak on Good Morning America, and my brother brought up the issue about the absconded phone records. The phone records of the final call between Juditha Brown and her daughter, Nicole Brown Simpson, were removed from the Simpson exhibit case file. And the final time was entered by stipulation. Well, when they entered that stipulation and you take the time in which they say that final phone call came back to Brentwood from Dana Point, Orange County, they left Brentwood at 8:45. The phone call, they allege, came in at 9:37. That gave them approximately 45 minutes to drive 75 miles on the busiest highway system rated by the U.S. Highway Administration in the nation. Today we have, because of your program and some other programs that we've been on, people will come forth with evidence and so forth. So today, we have all of the highway volumes, the traffic volumes of that particular night at that particular hour. We have the traffic density. We have the highway conditions. There was no HOV lane system completed. That was year 2 of highway construction to build the HOV system out there on the I-405 freeway. So all of these situations prevented them from making that drive in a 45-minute period of time. And anybody that tells you, as I talked to a highway patrolman back years ago and doing this investigation, I said, well, you know, they have them making the drive from Brentwood to Dana Point in 45 minutes. They turn red, and then they start laughing because they know the reality of driving that distance on that freeway system. So,
yeah, and that information you could find in the book Pursuit of Exhibit 35 and the OJ Simpson Murder Trial and its Hidden Secrets. And we did a whole show on that as well. Now, Mr. Johnson, previously, too, you were telling me some information about Mr. Ron Goldman's criminal record, and perhaps he was an informant?
I'm flipping from Whitehurst back to...
I apologize. Well, then you can continue then. Don't let me interrupt you.
No. I'll flip over to Ron Goldman at this point in time. Ron Goldman's criminal case file, you cannot review it in the state of California. It is protected by California Government Code 6254F. And that particular section of Section 6254, Article F of the California Government Code protects the information of criminals in the state of California anytime that they have been cooperating with law enforcement as a confidential informant. And so that is why that file was snatched out of my hand when I almost had my hands on it at the Malibu Municipal Courthouse back in 2000. So I can't say, in fact, that he was a confidential informant, but it kind of paints a picture in terms of just the docket sheet of, I know, especially after seeing these black men who have been killed by sworn officers of the court over petty misdemeanors. A guy like Orlando Castile up outside of St. Paul, Minnesota. He's riding in the car with his fiancée and 4-year-old child in the back and reaches to get his identification, and the policeman shoots him in the car, and Walter Scott in South Carolina shot 5 times in the back. Terrence Crutcher shot with his hands in the air in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I think of these situations, and then I think back to the docket sheet of Ronald Goldman, where he was stopped in April of 1991 for speeding and reckless driving and driving with a suspended license. The judge says, come to court, and I'm going to drop the charges of you driving with a suspended license and you driving, speeding, and reckless driving. Come to court. We're going to just charge you with not having your license in possession. Come back to court in June. In June, he doesn't come back. So court issues a $2,500 arrest warrant. They arrest him, bring him back. Says, okay, now come back for arraignment in August. He doesn't come back. The judge issues another, the second judge issues another $2,500 arrest warrant. They don't catch up with him until November. They tell him in August, come back in November. He doesn't come back in November. This judge issues a $10,000 warrant for him. and they finally pick him up again in January of the following year of 1992, and they tell him to come to court then, and he doesn't come to court, and that warrant stays outstanding until his death in 1994. Okay, and then after his death, the judge decides, okay, well, he's dead now, so we recall all of the warrants. But when we tallied up the warrants, he tallied up to almost $20,000 for that one case. And then when we pull up some other cases, this is in L.A. County. He had these multiple things. In Ventura County, he had a list of driving, recklessly and all of that stuff over in Ventura County. And as a black man, I just wonder. I said, how does it? I see you're under pins and needles when these individuals stop your car and so forth. And how are you going to be driving an automobile without a license and you knowing your license is suspended and nothing happens to you? So I thought about that, him being a snitch, even before I was aware of 6254. When we asked them to pull his file, the person came out of the file room. He had to brace himself against the doors to keep from look like he wanted to faint. And so he, instead of coming back to his window and telling me that he couldn't find the file, he made a left turn and started walking back and forth with his supervisor. His supervisor came to the window and reported, that file no longer exists. We don't have that file any longer. And so that file has been destroyed. And I said, well, no, ma'am, that file cannot be destroyed for 10 years. That file is not due to be destroyed until 2001. This is 2000. Well, who told you that? So forth. And I said, well, I can't go into you with that, And
Mr. Thomas, let me interrupt you for a second. What can you tell us about a personal romantic relationship between Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman, and also, people aren't aware of, Nicole Simpson and Mark Fuhrman?
What can I tell you about an intimate relationship with them?
Yes.
Well, I can tell you that several police officers had come to the complaints officer in the DA's office, a Detective Maxwell, and I think it was a lieutenant. I can't remember his last name specifically, and I don't want to call someone's name that I can't remember, but I do remember a lieutenant that said that Fuhrman had spoken to them during some social event that police officers had, a barbecue or something like that, and told them that she had a nice boob job.
Right.
She had nice breasts, nice looking breasts. She had breast enhancements and thus had nice looking breasts. And so the question is, how would you know that unless you had access to seeing that, okay? Unless you had close, intimate involvement with the person like that. Well, we know that she had breast implants because we have the autopsy reports. And the autopsy reports tell us that she had enhancements. But she wasn't dead at the time that you told this to Detective Maxwell and the lieutenant that told this information to the complaints officer in the DA's office, Lucianne Coleman, you see. Now, certainly others have gone into further allegations about the close connections that Fuhrman had with Nicole Brown Simpson. And I've listened to it, and I've, to a great extent believe in what they said, but that has not been my focus.
Right.
There are other things concerning Fuhrman that have been my focus, but not that intimate relationship with Nicole.
Now, I'm sure you've listened to all the Fuhrman tapes, right?
I listened to a great amount of it. You mean with Laura McKinney?
Yeah.
Yeah, I listened to a great amount of it. What about it?
I was just wondering if you listened to them. Now, also, too, Carl Colby. I had Carl Colby on the show. Do you have any kind of issues with his testimony?
I don't know Carl Colby.
He was the neighbor who called the 911 call. I think, he saw OJ looking in the window of Nicole's place, and he called the police.
Well, here's the deal.
Yeah.
I read, I think it was Kalen's book, where he stated that Nicole had told OJ that she was concerned about her safety and that she would like for him to check on her residence from time to time, you know. And so I don't think, if in fact that was the case, that Nicole still wanted Simpson to have some involvement in her life, since his kids, he had 2 kids by Nicole, you know, and he had characters that could check on you that I think that, you know, you would be, you wouldn't want to be messing around with some of the guys, you know. So yeah, I think he did check on Nicole from time to time around her residence, and I suspect that people who may have seen him do that might have decided, well, I should call the police.
Yeah. Carl Colby actually said on my show that if he had known it was OJ, if he had recognized it as being OJ, he wouldn't have called. But that he called because he saw a man looking in the window and he got disturbed. Now, you got to go back and check our archives and find the previous shows we did with Mr. Johnson. We've done about 7 hours with him, and it's all been great content. But, Mr. Johnson, I interrupted you. You were telling us about Fred Whitehurst.
Yeah. Fred, let me put it like this. Once I made contact with him, all of this thing that I had, this feeling that I had gotten to by 2016, that, you know, it just was not exciting. No, you know, I thought I had seen too much. Once that door opened with him, I mean, I've really come alive again to see for him, and not only him, but other FBI agents that I have met as a result of him have exposed in terms of where their hand was in this OJ Simpson matter as well. And that's been fascinating. I think that he may have been putting me to the test when we first met, because I had taken a position that one of the FBI agents that testified about the shoe prints of the Bruno Mali shoes, the guy just blatantly lied, period. FBI agent William Boziak. And Whitehurst said, well, you know, I've always found Boziak to be pretty much of a straight shooter, and this and that, first one thing and the other. And I didn't change my position. I said, man, the man is an itinerant liar, period. I said, Stevie Wonder could have looked at those shoe prints and those 11.5-inch sidewalk tiles that those silver soles on the bottom of the Bruno Mali's made, and knew that somebody with the size of Simpson's foot would not fit in those shoes. I said 11.5 inches is a little more than a midget's foot. And I said, to be certain about what we were looking at when we got access to those police photos, we sent away to Italy to obtain a sample, a copy of the size 46, size 12 U2887 shoe sole that he got on the witness stand and stated made those prints at Bundy. I always thought it was funny that he never went down to the central jail and put a ruler on Simpson's foot. He simply used verbal gymnastics to talk to you people about size. A size 12, a size 12. If I ask you, Ed, give me the dimensional statistics of the size shoe you wear. What size shoe do you wear, Ed?
I think it's a 10.5.
How many, if I ask you, how many inches is your size 10.5 shoe? And I'll bet you, we're going to bet $50 down to the quarter of an inch. Tell me the dimensions of your shoe, size 10.5 shoe.
I would probably just bet 11 inches. No?
You want to
I don't want to bet. I don't want to bet, no. And by the way, too, now you sent me a picture, like an outline of a foot and an outline of a shoe print and stuff like that. Can people find that in one of your books or your movies?
You can find it. You can find it. You can find us doing you can find us doing a demonstration when we made that documentary back in 2000, between 2000 and 2004. But I think that demonstration at that particular time was simply to show that shoe print was sold to 20 other shoe companies, that shoe sole. And the construction of that shoe sole has a raised heel. And the logo of the shoe sits in front of the heel, but before the forefoot. In that area of any type of shoe with a raised heel raises the logo above the ground, so you can't find it. We won't see it. So the question that we were raising in the documentary, that if you don't see the logo, how is it that you were able to determine, this FBI agent, that this was a Bruno Mali shoe and not the other 20 shoe companies that Silga, who was under contract to provide these shoe soles, sold their contingents to beyond Bruno Mali? That's what that demonstration shows in the documentary. In 2000, we hadn't got a tracing of Simpson's foot. So what you're talking about, I think if you go on and Google it, Simpson's foot, you'll see the images of it, because we made Simpson's foot green and we made Glenn Rogers' foot blue. I've been interacting with Glenn Rogers, who's on death row in Florida for the last 20 years as well. And so he speaks openly, writes openly to OMIG as well. So I asked for a tracing of his foot. We already had the dimensions of Simpson's foot in 2000, but he's always on the golf course and on all kinds of excuses where you can't get him to do this and do that.
Right.
Ultimately, Dr. Johnson was able to get him to provide us a tracing of his foot, which I always wished for. So even though we got that tracing 5 years after we initially asked the nurse who was at his house when he moved down to Florida, the dimensions are the same that she gave us back then. And so you will see his foot, his toes stick through the front of the shoe sole, at the tip of the toe, the big toe on the side, and the little toe on the other side, because that Bruno Mali Silga sole comes to a pointed edge almost. And then his arches hang over the sides of the shoe. And quiet as it's kept, his heel would really be riding the back of that shoe. And so that, in my opinion, it would be absurd for an individual to pay close to $300 to buy a casual shoe, and you'd have to cut holes in them before you could even walk out of the store. But this is the kind of madness that they sold to the public, and the public has bought into the tabloid madness because individuals who wear Brooks Brothers suits and stand up, and talk to you under the color of authority, tell you something, and then you run off and say, well, he's with the FBI. He wouldn't lie.
And real quick, too, I did a whole show with a guest talking about the chain of custody of the photographs at the football game with the pictures of him supposedly wearing the shoes. That's all in dispute, too, as well. But, Mr. Johnson, we only had about 10 minutes left, 11 minutes. What else is going on with Whitehurst?
Well, the Whitehurst so much, man.
I know.
Whitehurst came back after that encounter. You know, I didn't think we were going to talk again because I said, no, man, this man is a liar. I said, now, you do whatever you want to do. Here's the photograph of Simpson's foot sitting outside this shoe. I said, this guy, had he measured his foot, he would have seen that. So he comes back to me, and he says, you know, I talked to some other agents. We checked out your documentary and this and that. We checked you out, and we didn't think that anybody else was interested in this case. He said, we put some documents away, and we've kept them in storage for the last 20-some-odd years, going on 25 years now. And he said, we want you to have these documents, and we're not going to ship them, he said, because we have problems with stuff that we sent, you know, not reaching where it's supposed to go. We want to put them in your hands, okay? Now, I'm thinking that he's talking about maybe a briefcase full of papers. He sends me a photo, and I sent it to you.
Yeah.
Documents 3 feet high, over 50 pounds of documents associated with the Simpson case, and not just the Simpson case, but the malfeasance of what was going on. At first, I think Whitehurst had this edginess of anger, you know, when we would communicate. And I didn't understand what it was about. And then he came to talk about all of these men that had been framed by members of the FBI. Whitehurst came into the Simpson case. He wasn't a prima donna. Whitehurst had virtually had his career destroyed in the FBI because he had, after continuing to come to his senior administrators in the FBI and complain about the conduct of the sloppiness inside the FBI laboratory, the comfortability with racial epithets being used inside the FBI laboratory. He and other agents said, well, you know, we didn't sign up for this. I don't give a damn I don't give a darn if we are. If we do have individuals who are racist within the FBI is supposed to be the top professional investigative agency of the United States government. And that's what we signed up for. Not for agents coming into the laboratory, absconding with scientists' research and going back to their offices and changing it to benefit prosecutors gaining convictions on innocent individuals. And that was the anger that he was coming to me with. And the fact, the way that we had gotten into it is because he felt my anger when I said Cochran may have used this thing regarding the blood that was contaminated, that FBI agent Marks took the witness stand and testified. He had allegedly taken the research from other agents who had actually performed the research, took it back to his office where they had found a high concentration of contamination indicating that the blood collected from Simpson from that back gate had been planted because it contained a high concentration of EDTA. They had found that the sample of blood that was found on socks that had been thrown down on the floor on his bedroom had a high concentration of EDTA. Another doctor said that it had that high a concentration been in anybody's blood, they'd be dead. But that's the high concentration that these research analysts found in the chemistry laboratory. Whitehurst wasn't in the chemistry laboratory anymore because his senior administrators was trying to destroy his career. He was standing outside taking a smoke near the paint chip laboratory. Here he is, a PhD chemist, top explosive expert in the FBI. And because by the time of the Simpson trial, he had filed close to 200 complaints outside of the FBI with the Office of the Inspector General of the United States Department of Justice because of the conduct that was allowed to continue to take place where these so-called, what they call blue flamers within the FBI, individuals who want to elevate their professional career at the expense of destroying the lives of innocent people. And he began to, you know me, before we had this conversation, this interview, I said Cochran got on the Simpson defense team because he needed to get there. That is my opinion. He needed to get there in order to gain evidence of malfeasance. Before I met Whitehurst, we knew that Cochran knew about those phone records that would have exonerated Simpson, and we certainly still believe that based upon the highway evidence that we have now from the California Department of Transportation. But now, we now know that Cochran also had the fact that this blood had been planted, and he had subpoenaed Whitehurst to testify in the Simpson trial as a result of Whitehurst filing this complaint, which we believe is case file 9403575, filed with the Office of the Inspector General. Now, we filed 3 FOIA requests, Freedom of Information requests, and we have gotten nothing but the runaround from both the Office of the Inspector General. Then they kicked it over to the FBI, and the FBI comes back with, well, we can't allow you to have it because it's a violation of Section 5B1A, this and that, and first one thing and the other. Now you got to go look up 5B1A, and, oh, it's a matter of privacy and that type of craziness. So when I came back, so when I said something about, I think had Cochran had this information, he would have had enough leverage, because Cochran was very instrumental in securing the final acquittal of Elmer Geronimo Pratt, who by the time of his release had served close to 29 years in prison because he had been by the FBI under their COINTELPRO program that was going on at the time, along with Los Angeles sheriff's deputies and others, law enforcement officials, and the prosecutor attempting to put him away, who was now a judge in the Superior Court of Los Angeles, California. So Whitehurst, I'm thinking I'm telling Whitehurst something that will really get his goat and get him, really lined up on my side. This guy comes over the top of me and says, look up the name. You said this guy's name was Elmer Geronimo Pratt. I said, yeah. He served 29 years in California state prisons before Cochran and his lawyer, Stuart Hanlon, could secure his release in Orange County with an Orange County judge, Eugene Dickey. In the meantime, he comes back and tells me, look up Elmer Daniels. And I said, Elmer Daniels? He said, yeah, Google the name Elmer Daniels. I said, what about Elmer Daniels? An innocent man framed by the FBI that did 39 years in prison. I sent you his picture as he's walking out of the Delaware State Prison. And then I said, how many more of these individuals do you know like that? And he just starts running down the names: Donald Eugene Gates, Kirk Odom, Derry Nelson, John Norman Huffington, Oscar Bolin, Willie Manning, Sante Tribble, George Perret. Sante Tribble, 17 years old, sent to prison for almost 30 years to find out again this phony hair fiber evidence turns out to be dog hair.
Mr. Johnson, we only have about a minute left, but what I want to do is I want to have you come back for a couple hours, and maybe we could just put it on Patreon, okay? Because you got so much to share with the audience, and it's so important. These are very serious topics. And by the way, I can tell the audience, too, this kind of stuff does happen, because I worked on a murder trial one time, and the only thing we needed to prove, the guy confessed. The only thing we needed to prove was that some evidence was tampered while it was in possession of the police in the evidence locker, and the guy got 8 years. He was able to get out. He's probably out right now. But, Mr. Johnson, in 1 minute, what do you want to leave us with?
I don't know. We always...
Our first interview was 5 hours. Let's tell them that, okay? Our first interview went on for 5 hours, okay? But we don't have 5 hours now, so let's just plug the book. Okay.
I'll be glad to come back. Man.
Thank you very much.
Anytime.
T.H. Johnson, investigative team coordinator for the OMIG, the Ocean Medical Investigative Group. The documentary film is called Serpents Rising. I cannot recommend it enough. It's going to change your mind about the case. And then if you want to get into the serious details of it, a serious investigator, new witnesses reveal the hidden truth. The People versus OJ Simpson, The Real Crime, that's one book, and the other one is The Pursuit of Exhibit 35 and the OJ Simpson Murder Trial. I have all these books. I have the film. He sent them to me. And if you're a real details guy and you really like police reports and evidence, you like to see the facts, this is the kind of work that you want to see. Thank you so much, Mr. T.H. Johnson.
Thank you so much, Ed. Take care.
Good night.